So this is part 2 of my coming out story. So where we left off, I was talking a bit about the childhood part, and what I started to say was, as a kid growing up in the 80s and 90s, people always say this when they get to be my age. They say, oh, it was much more permissive and pastoral and idyllic, and like, it seems that way, and in some ways it was. My childhood was very extraordinary in that there was a lot of dysfunction and a lot of abuse. But to give you some examples, like when I was growing up, and I don't know, kids might still do this kind of stuff, but when you'd move to a place, to an apartment complex, you'd eventually make friends with all the neighbor kids. And even in towns of a couple thousand people, like this would have been in 1992, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And all the kids would eventually congregate, and you have this like our pal, our gang kind of situation, and you would play tag and hide and seek. And I remember particularly we would go explore the old abandoned cannery, and the really bad kids would play on the railroad tracks and put coins on the railroad tracks or bottles. And we had one of the places we lived, there was this guy that drove around with this really creepy truck that was always full of cans and bottles. And everyone said, oh, that's the neighborhood child molester. And we were out all day, like in the summer mostly, in spring, but we'd be out like from breakfast till at dinner, and then we'd go back out after dinner, and then we'd go just next door and stay at the neighbors for a slumber party. So we'd be wandering around and oftentimes get in trouble with neighbors. Not usually cops, but the older kids, yeah. But like there would be this guy driving around and they'd be like, oh yeah, that's the sex offender. And he'd drive around slowly and we'd all be like, tee, and like scared. And but we'd pick up bottles and throw it at his truck and he'd just keep going. And I never knew if he was registered. We assumed he was, and which was probably unfair. But and then there'll always be the rundown house with the single person living alone, and it's like, oh yeah, don't go near there or you get kidnapped and stuff. And we could have gotten kidnapped or whatever, but we didn't, and we would just be out doing our thing. And it wasn't like we were traveling for 10, 12 miles away. It was within, like a mile or two radius. But about 7 years old, we had this, what seemed like this big abandoned forest next door to the apartment complex. And I know where that piece of little grass is now, and of course it looks like it's just like a yard. But back then it was like we'd go through the trees and the trail, the coyote trail, and then there was this like really tall grass. And that was where our forts were. And the girls had their fort over there, and the boys had their fort over there. And of course, the grass seemed like it was 20 feet tall when it probably was like 5 feet tall. And we made these forts just by smushing down the grass. And the girls and boys division was like super strict back then. And there was also, we made like a girls and boys bathroom because people always had to go pee, and so we didn't want to pee in their fort, so like, okay, go over there and do it. So there was that. And I remember one time there was a neighborhood kid, and I would have been 5 or 6, and he seemed a lot older, so maybe he was 9, 10, 11. And there was another boy kid my age, and we went down to the fort, and the other kid, um, the older boy was like, okay, we're gonna play a game and we'll all get, and he wasn't like that much older than us, but he was like, we're gonna play a game and get in our underwear and stuff. So we did, and it was like, whatever, like being curious, I guess. And the kid, we all got in underwear, which back then in the 90s we wore those like Hanes that were white with the red red trim, and they have like pictures of Ninja Turtles or Superman on them or whatever. And so I remember being very excited about that experience, but also terrified. And the kid, like, I think he did touch me or whatever, but it wasn't in a way where at the time, like, I was really upset and terrified. But I think I was more upset because I was excited by it than I was scared. So that was like I say, like 5, 6, 7 years old. And this kid was 10, 11, maybe. And he obviously had more of an idea of who he was, I imagine, than I did. But so I don't know if we got all the way naked, but we were mostly naked, and the kid touched me. And I was excited, but also super freaked out. And I ran home like bawling my eyes out because I'm real melodramatic, as everyone knows, and even now. And I was like, went to my mom and to the um some one of my mom's girlfriends that was there, friends that are girls, and was like, this kid, he like touched my pee-pee or whatever. And I feel bad because I think that kid probably got in a lot of trouble, and for something I probably actually really enjoyed. But I made this whole scene about it, and I think that somebody went and talked to him, and God, I hope things didn't go south for him. But so that was like and that got me thinking. It was like, that was weird, but kind of fun, you know? So that was always in my mind, and over the years, there were more situations kind of like that, like spin the bottle or truth or dare and stuff at slumber parties, but it was never really anything. And I'm getting excited because this next part's pretty fun. So, and traumatic. But so I'm going along, and then I had a friend who was a girl she was very close friend, and everyone joked that we were going to get married. And we even talked about getting married one day because we were super close for 8 years and we really loved each other. And her family really loved me, and we were inseparable. And so I always thought, oh yeah, I'm gonna get married to this girl. And it was just what you do, like playing house or whatever. So there was that. And as I got to be up in fifth grade, I was pretty much an outcast, but I had a group of friends who were an outcasts. And then when I got to be seventh and eighth grade, I was really bullied, like pushed into lockers, bullied, and stalked in the halls, and just treated like psychologically tortured. And that could have been because of a earlier experience with one of my family members for a couple years. where we were very abused and um, psychologically tormented and isolated for several years, which left a lot of damage that took years to work through, and definitely left some deeply rooted post traumatic stress syndrome that I still struggle with to this day. But when I got to be in seventh and eighth grade, I was bullied. And like one of my bullies was like this, and I'm not huge. I'm 5'11", but I was bigger than a lot of kids earlier on. And this little bully was like, you know, munchkin, and he evidently had insecurity issues, and he'd be like, follow me down the hall, and he'd like push me, like body check me into the locker, and I'd be like, oh, I'm so scared, and I'd go in the bathroom and hide. And I was really tormented. I was really tormented in school. And the worst was later on when I was in high school, and my friends who were like the Losers Club, if you've ever read It by Stephen King, that's where I get that term from. They turned on me. I so I realized that I had a sexuality when I was about 12, like most of us do, by accident. And that was pretty cool, but terrifying. I think the expression "le petit mort" by the French probably puts those early formative experiences in onanism in a very apt way. But so I knew I had a sexuality, and religion hadn't come into my life very much. It was in and out, and there were certain things like we went to Lutheran church for a while, and there were certain rules about God and Jesus, but nothing in my life was ever consistent. And so the rules that were today would be gone tomorrow, because the cast of characters was always changing, and there would always be a different home and a different school and a different church and different friends. And so it was like, I don't know, I just kind of tried to hold on to center in the middle of all that chaos and family dysfunction and toxicity. But so I knew I had a sexuality, and I thought it fit in with girls. So that's how it started. But it didn't really, it was just kind of there. It was like part of my routine. But when I got to be in eighth grade, I, in my English or literature arts class, in my social studies class, there was a guy. So I am 15 now. There was a guy, and at, I was in the front, and I was like, my body language was always like, hurt me, please. And I was in the front, teacher's pet, and when I'd have to make speeches, I would like do like a report, I would shake, and like I was just so shy. And I'm still really shy, but I just have a way to handle it. So I guess I'm like more of an extroverted introvert now than back then. I was like super introverted. But there was a group of guys in the back corner who were like the formative jocks. Like in high school, they became the football players and the soccer players and stuff. And they were always like, not always, but they were making comments and rude to me and bullying a little bit, but not as bad as some of the other bullies I had had. And so one day, and I just loved studying. I loved getting good grades. I loved school. Um, hated PE. uh, what else did I like? I just liked learning and doing my own things and making shit. And there was one day where a kid said something particularly mean to me, and I think I was like really scared, but like shaking mad, and I might have actually stood up for myself or just been like, just threw him some shade, like, you know what, I don't even give a fuck anymore, like, who are you? You know. So, and that really took people aback. And maybe a few days later, maybe a few weeks later, the kid who was the boy, who was just a small little thing, um, came over and he sat next to me and he said, I want to apologize for how I've been to you and how my friends have been to you. And he was like fierce. Like, he was looking at them like, don't you say anything. And he was really sweet. And he was apologized, and I didn't even know what to say. I was like, oh, okay, thanks. And then just went on to my lonely life, you know? So over time, him and I became very close friends and like family. And I realized pretty quickly on that I liked him more than just a friend. It's like I said, I was 15 now. And so it was like months, maybe not even till 8th grade. We were just like talk every once in a while. And he'd always be super friendly. And I think we even talked on the phone a couple times. It was just, there was no plan. It was just like completely spontaneous and synergy when things would happen where we'd hang out or talk on the phone and somewhere wherever I was living and or whatever school I was at. But I was at those two schools for quite a while, the middle school and the high school. And so eventually, I don't know, it was till after the other kid came up and talked to me or before, but eventually he had me over to his house for a slumber party to play video games. And his family was really nice. He had a really beautiful house. Like, my family was white trash and poor, and they were well off, and they had this beautiful house. And his parents were really nice, and he was nice, and his brother was nice. And he's probably going to see this, and that they won't talk to me. That family has not talked to me in a decade because of like homophobia. But so we were close, and sometime in there, another kid in 8th grade in social studies, so the year before I went down to the big house, they call it, to the high school, kid came up to me and sat next to me out of like nowhere, and his buddies were behind me. So I thought it was some kind of trick. And he sat next to me and he seemed really nervous, but like really excited. And I think I was on the right and he was on the left. And he looked over and he said, really quietly, like, Cody, have you ever kissed a boy before or kissed a guy before? And I was like a deer in the headlights. And I was just like, it seemed like he wanted to know, but like at the same time, if I would have said yes, then I probably would have got the shit beat out of me. So I was just like, no. Okay, 20 minutes is about, it takes several hours to upload these 20-minute videos. So part 3 is coming, folks. Thanks.